everybody, Alex Miller at Capnion here. Today I am finally going to continue my mini series talking about synthetic data and differential privacy. And today I'm going to focus a little bit more on differential privacy. There's roughly three areas I'm going to hit. One is, well, differential privacy, if you go to the Wikipedia page, it's a little bit of a red herring. They're talking about a theory of just how much noise do you add to a data set. Item number two, and kind of really the key one, okay, in a lot of applications, I'm just adding noise to a data set. Real questions now are, how much noise do I add, and why does this work for privacy? I think it works a little bit better than you would naively think. And then at the end, I'm going to talk very practically about what are some pros and cons, in this case, overlapping between synthetic data and differential privacy, when is a good time to use a technique like this and when it's not a good time. Now here I have the differential privacy Wikipedia page, and I think how this topic is presented in some of the most noob-facing environments is a little bit of a tragedy. So there's some pretty intense mathematical language on this Wikipedia page. I'm going to run away with a kind of gross oversimplification definition for the rest of this video, but I'm going to talk about why I'm telling you the right story about the real deal and giving you some hints at what the real deal is. So here, let's look at this definition of epsilon differential privacy. What this is really saying, a couple key clauses, focus on A, be a randomized algorithm that takes a data set as input. You could do other things, but let's just assume whenever we're thinking about this for the rest of this video, that randomized algorithm is we just add some noise to all the interesting columns of the data set. If it's a numeric column, we are literally going to add some other number that we generated randomly, so just random noise. And then if you're dealing with categorical data, you could do something like, well, 50% of the time, just going to randomly change that value to one of the different categories that column can take on. So in general, just randomly fudging up the data. So what this definition is saying is that you want to fudge up the data enough so that if you think about any one person that might be in the data set, the data is fudged up enough that you can't tell anything about if that person is in the data set at all, and certainly not point to any given row in the data set that you want to claim is that person's data. So this is plausible deniability. If you were going to learn something negative about me from that data set, supposedly, the differential privacy is supposed to give me a room to say, no, that you're confused. That wasn't me. I'm not in that data set. That column isn't about me. You got somebody else. You're embarrassing somebody else, but it's not me. Move along. Now, let me give you some specific data and a specific narrative. A common privacy issue with data is that you accidentally leave in enough information that people can do some detective work and triangulate later. So in this example, I have some fake information about people that are similar to yours truly. Similar age, similar height and weight, and then I'm going to give latitude and longitude of where they live just to have some extra nice numerical data. And in this fantasy, maybe we're thinking that we also know whether these people have an embarrassing diagnosis. And so what we're trying to prevent here is something like, oh, I know that you are a particular height and weight. I know that you live at this location. I have looked in this data set and I found exactly one person that could be you. And I see that you have the embarrassing diagnosis. And this would be a failure to protect my privacy, the privacy of my medical records. So in this simple example, you can see where adding noise provides plausible deniability for me. And that now somebody who has exactly my height and weight, exactly my age, exactly my latitude and longitude, Because noise was added earlier in the process, now instead of the story being, oh, I found an exact match for you, Alex Meller, and I know that you have the embarrassing diagnosis, because there was noise added, I can say, well, no, that's bullshit. That's somebody of similar height and weight and age that lives in my neighborhood, and they have the embarrassing diagnosis, and it's not me. And I want to point out here kind of two key questions about pro and con on this technology. One, you need a lot of people that are pretty similar to each other, or this is not going to work. And two, there's an important question of what level of noise is enough to accomplish this task relative to, it's easier the more people you have and the closer they are together in their various traits. All right, now for practical matters of where and when to use these things and why. We've already seen that synthetic data, you really want data that is large with lots of observations. You want those observations to all be, each one of them, similar to a lot of other observations. I'll talk in a bit about extreme bad examples where it's a little clearer. These issues are murkier for synthetic data, but it's probably true there as well that you want a smooth data set where everybody's similar to everybody else and not something with a lot of outliers. So what's wrong with outliers? In both cases, the issue with outliers is you are or you are not going to generate a new outlier observation in your new data set, and both are bad. So a great example for a thought experiment is the world's tallest man. He had a genetic condition that made him the world's tallest man, so he did not fit terribly well into the bell curve distribution, which is to say that the world's next tallest person was actually quite a bit shorter. So what happens when you use a technique like we've been discussing on a data set with this fellow in it? If you put in an observation of a super tall person, well, you failed at this sort of heuristic definition of differential privacy, right? Because we can definitely tell if the world's tallest man was in the data set based on whether or not we get one of these huge outliers. And then if we do have a really super tall person in the data set, we're looking at more problems if we did a good job really reflecting the covariance in the data, and that maybe the world's tallest man probably has heart problems. Pretty common thing that I'm making that up, but that travels with being genetically unusually super tall. If we're saying that the person in the new data set also has problems, which is something we would want to do if we wanted good analytics, we are failing to protect the world's tallest man's privacy. But then if we're not doing these things, possibly we're going a ways towards screwing up our results. And then in some applications, particularly in healthcare, it can be the outliers that are most important for things like cost and other metrics. So the question is, what do we do with outliers? And with these particular privacy techniques, we don't have real great options. They work a lot better when you're dealing with a population where everybody's similar to a couple other people. Closing thoughts. I think the world is a little topsy-turvy for these two similar techniques. Differential privacy and a lot of the information that's out there can look really intimidating, but in actual implementations, you're maybe just adding noise. And this is a big benefit because you can figure out more tangibly how much your results are going to be affected, etc. Conversely, I think synthetic data often looks very easy in some of the ways I've seen it presented lately, but then if you're getting into deep neural net methods, you're possibly making everything really opaque, and you could have problems where your answers are wrong and you don't have a great sense of why they're wrong, and you run into the same privacy problems asking around.